All right, welcome to tonight's stream. It is Sunday, July 12th, 6:30 p.m. Central Time, and this is the Pete Makes Games live stream. As promised, we're going to stay on schedule. Today is an art stream, and within the next hour and a half, I hope to get all of these weird little guys, if not just a few of them. We get all these weird little guys turned into sprites. We're working in a sprite, and I used my iPad Procreate to create these little guys, some of which I have already put into placeholder sprites. Most of them I have not. And these aren't going to be the only robots I do. For one thing, I need to do bosses, which will be a little bit larger. And I do want to have a wider variety of enemies than just these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want to show you this guy right here with kind of the gumball top and the little spider legs as a wall crawler. And they crawl along, they pathfind and they crawl along walls. This is the universal symbol for crawling. And so far, I've got it fairly down pat. It does kind of wig out on occasion if it gets near a door to another room. I have to nail that down code-wise, but it works most of the time. I just need to make sure it works all the time. This one, on Friday we were talking about Girl Robot. This one looks suspiciously like Robot's head. And that's because it is Robot's head, or at least a copy of it. And what looks like a mask is actually supposed to be a light. And you can tell it's a light because these little black lines are coming out of it, which is comic speak for radiation. I need to make that a little bit more light-like, and I think once I start applying colors, that will work a lot better than it currently is. This one, that is not supposed to be a donut or a tire. That's supposed to be a body, and that's its little belly area. That is not what that is, sadly. That is instead, it looks very much like a donut, but this is a bat. And you won't believe this, it flies. Or at least it's supposed to. And right now I have a little mouse looking dude instead of this. I don't know how I'm going to fit this into an 8x8. I may have to fit it into a 16x8, although that's awfully large. Maybe I have to do a 12x8 instead, 12 pixels wide by 8 pixels tall. But that is the bat, flying enemy, kind of flies straight line towards the player. If it hits a platform or some other boundary, it kind of scoots along until it can get to the player again. Not particularly difficult or intelligent pathfinding, but it's going to get the job done. This one that looks sort of like a toaster with a jet engine is the patrol bot I mentioned on Friday, and the patrol bot's sole purpose is to go left and right along a platform and will illuminate various parts of the room with its light cone. We talked about the light cone at the very end of the live stream on Sunday. On Wednesday's game dev stream, I'm actually going to go into more detail with that. And then we have the last two enemies. This one is a heart. So, in keeping with the tradition of the Girl Robot comic and having very cute things which are deadly, this one is going to be a heart until Girl gets close to it, at which point the points at the bottom, I've lost my cursor. There we go. The points at the bottom open up. And from the heart drops out a machine gun, which can fire projectiles, which can, of course, damage girl. And then when girl goes away, it closes back up, and it's a cute little heart again. I thought that was kind of funny. And then this looks sort of like a rabbit with grasshopper legs. We're going to probably workshop those legs tonight. When it hops and approaches girl, we see that on the underside is a gigantic mouth with, sharp, very unbunny-like teeth. How am I going to take something that, granted this is very simple line art, how am I going to take something even with this much detail and break it into an 8x8 pixelated image? Now, I have 4 colors to choose from kind of pea green to, forest green, a Kelly green. I am not going to pretend that I know the names of green, but I have all 4 shades of green that the Game Boy is known for. So I have to take these 1 pixel at a time and build these enemies in these 8x8 squares. Okay, that's probably going to be a challenge. Well, it's definitely going to be a challenge. And I know I'm going to lose some of the graphical fidelity with translating these weird little dudes into this, but I still have to figure out how to do so. Not only that, but this color right here, the not quite the darkest green, this shade, that's the background that I'm using for the worlds. I can't really use that as the outline for these, because if I do, well, they're going to completely blend in and they're going to be harder to see, which means they'll be easier for them to hit girl. If I do the darkest, that is contrast, but that's not a lot of contrast. Think about the Game Boy screen and its less than stellar refresh rate. Granted, we're not going to be playing this on an original Game Boy, but still, I just think it'll be hard to track enemies, which is why outlines will either have to be this color or that color. And I'm probably going to lean towards the lightest of the greens for the outline. So already I've got a color limitation. The outline must be the lightest green. Each enemy must be 8 pixels by 8 pixels. And to be honest, I'm going to sacrifice animation for readability, at least for the small enemies. For bosses, I plan on seeing a lot more animation, but for these little enemies, I'm kind of afraid the animation would be kind of blurry at resolutions like that. If you were here on the Friday live stream, girl is roughly 16 pixels tall by 8 pixels wide. So the enemies are literally just as wide as girl, but half as tall. So those are the considerations that I had to kind of think about. And not saying it can't be done, just saying it won't be done easily. So we have our first 8x8 square, and I want to do the popcorn guy, which starts out with what basically amounts as a dog food bowl. So we have a straight line, which already off to a good start. I think one reason I like doing robots is that I spoke too soon about the straight lines. I think one reason I like doing robots is it's really kind of lends itself to symmetry, and I can do that. I can do symmetry fairly well. All right, so we've got the dog food bowl part. Now we've got to figure out the rounded dome. That's probably too high to start with. That's probably as good a dome as I'm going to get. I could play with that later, especially if I drop everything down, which I think I need to because the legs don't need to be that big. You know, we're thinking more or less like spider legs. There, that ought to work. I can erase this. All right. And I'm actually going to scoot the edges of the fishbowl out a bit. That does give me a little bit more of a dome. I think I'm going to keep that. It's not nice and perfectly round. And I could apply a little bit of, you know, kind of the Fibonacci sequence, which this was a happy accident. I found that if you round your corners with numbers of pixels according to the Fibonacci sequence, so 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, keep on going, you actually get a really nice rounded curve. Yeah, that looks a whole lot rounder. Yeah, we can roll with that. That is sweet. All right, so I'm going to put up the legs, and then I want to look through what y'all have said, because I can already tell you there's going to be some sweet answers. That looks very robot leggy, which I don't think is a real term. I say that, it probably is. Actually, it kind of looks like a UFO right now, which, if you know anything about me, duh, of course it's going to look like a UFO. Yeah, let's roll with that. That one in the back should be a little bit smaller, just because, you know, foreshortening and all that fun stuff. All right, we have our outline. Yeah, it looks like a UFO. Yeah, we're going to keep it as that. Now let's fill it in. I don't want to fill it in with this color, because if I do, you're going to see very little contrast there. I don't want to do the darkest color, because I need that one for kind of dark spots to give it detail and depth. So let's do that. Actually, what I think I'll do is I will actually fill in the top one with the darkest one. All right, so we have some good color there. I think I want to erase these pixels. That rounds it off a bit too much. Yeah, I like it having a squarish base. All right, so we got a robot. If this part here is a gumball, or looks like a gumball dispenser, you know, a la Tom Servo, well, it needs gumballs in it. So let's put some of those in there. All right, so we got that one. We're going to need to switch to a different color. Let's actually... There we go. And that, I'm going to put 1 pixel there. Erase this pixel. Wrong thing to do, Pete. And I don't like that because then that one on the right is nowhere near as round as it should be. I think I'm going to leave it that way for right now and come back and edit it later. All right, we've got this darkest color. And what would a robot be without various buttons and doodads hanging off of it? So we'll just say those are buttons, or if you want to be very dystopian, a serial number for it that identifies it as, you know, some sort of killer. Don't think I want it to be a killer because I want to make this a non-violent game, but still. And then, oops, no, you know what? I'm going to choose this color for the legs in the foreground. Almost. Let's give it just a little bit of depth. Let's take this color. We'll put that there to give it just a little bit of shade. And then let's take this and we will use that for the back leg and the tops. The top pixels for the forelegs. Now we have something that is fairly well shaded. Let's do the robot head that will serve as a light source. All right, if I have the cone, if I can wire up the cone, the light cone to where it's coming out of here, then that will definitely look like a light, especially if the head rotates along with it, which I'll have to figure out how to do, which means I'll have to remember how to do radians and trigonometry. Hot dog. You know, when my calculus teacher told me that I would need to remember all this math, really didn't think it would be for making a video game, and I doubt she did either. All right, so that is that robot. I can already see issues with the rotation here because if I just have it rotate in Godot and just have the entire sprite rotate, it's going to look out of place in a Game Boy game because we'll have squares that are tilted, pixels that are tilted, when that's not how pixels work. However, get back over here. If I do this, if I take that, here's what happens if I try to rotate it, because Sprite does this neat thing where you can rotate and it will keep the pixel integrity. It'll keep every pixel as a nice ordered square. Watch what happens. I mean, that looks like the Nazi at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's not a look we really want. I don't want this to be a horror game. Oh, that looks even worse. Super Mario Brothers 2, the Phantos, the little dudes that chased you when you got a key. Yeah, that's giving me that vibes, and those guys always terrified the mess out of me as a kid. So yeah, I'm not... Oh, now they're just dead. That's what those two X's mean. We've got two Tetris pieces, two T pieces. Right now I have a very kind of 50s, almost retro vibe. And when I dig up the old girl robot comics and we go through those so you can see my inspiration, you'll see that I absolutely had that vibe. What says 50s retro sci-fi flying better than a dude in a jetpack? Okay, you said flying saucers. Okay, I mean, you'd thought out You would have thought I would have gotten that one, huh? So when I was thinking flying saucers, I was thinking of, and I do not remember the artist, you know, where the jetpack was more like a repulsor. So instead of flames shooting out the back, there were these like concentric rings that went down. And I'm sure that was to represent, you know, the wonderful power of magnetism and levitation, which, hold on, my daughter's sending me a text saying, hey, what's your Twitch username? Well, I mean, you probably could have figured that out, but that's okay. So let me try the jetpack thing first. Although I mean, just a jetpack with a laser on it. Well, not a laser because I don't want this to be flying and projectile. Maybe a variant of it. Let me try to build a jetpack. All right. So all right, so there is a jetpack. Oops. All right, I can see the rings. It's gonna, a kamikaze. That is a good variant for this enemy. Like one that, you know, slightly different color, slightly different shape that explodes and creates an AoE effect. Ooh, I like that. Huh. Dang, that's nice. Ooh, that could be kind of a jerky thing to do, but in a good way. Yeah, okay. We're going to think about that for the time being. All right, so we got our jetpack. Let's shade it in real quickly. And you know what? I don't think we need much with it. You know, something like this very easily says, yeah, I'm small. I'm a bit harder to hit. I'm levitating around. I would, however, I'm not going to put wings. I'm really staying away from those because I think you're right. But just stabilizers. You know, something to keep it from, you know, kind of going off kilter. And just one little bit, let me actually, that little bit right there. Just to signify direction. Almost has the look of a phage floating around and blowing up cells. Huh. Huh. It does. Ain't that neat? Sure won't be thinking about that later tonight. Alright, I like that though. Let's do just a tiniest bit of coloring just to give it, you know, kind of a front back. I wanted this little bit to represent kind of a repulsor in the back to show, oh, it's going forward. But I kind of like this. It's not, well, one more thing. How can you tell it's deadly? Easy. Yeah, that's supposed to be a spike, but that just makes it look like a splotch now. Oh, wait. Now it's got a knife attached to it. And as we all know, there, I like that. We only have one easy one left. So let's get that easy one out of the way. And that easy one is the little, to me it looks like a Roomba with a light on it. The patrol bot that goes left and right and illuminates everything. I'll leave 1 pixel of blank space, to show levitation. Now this guy is not completely symmetrical. The back is just curved slightly less than the front. In fact, let's do this. There, that shows exactly what I want to, because I do have to put a light on the front of that one to show, where the light cone's coming from. No, that really doesn't give enough of the cone. There, that looks cool. Easily see light coming out. I'm going to fill that one with that shade because I'm going to fill, there we go. Man, you have to make some tough decisions when you're left with 4 shades of green. But, that's fine. Okay. And this one really doesn't have, much in the way of detail. I think that kind of does a good job. We have a little, you can kind of see, there's a little bit of shadow right here, right behind the light. We have this just to give it some depth, kind of looks, kind of make it look a little bit more round than it is. Looks good to me. Let's try just one more thing. Let's do that. And that just to give a little bit of depth of a slightly rounded edge. All right, that is our patrol bot, and that patrol bot looks, looks like it looks like it levitates. Looks like it does nothing but illuminate, which it does. In fact, even though this enemy, I've already got this enemy coded, I just have a very bland sprite for it. Even though this enemy does have a collision shape and it does technically have a hitbox, it can be stunned. But 1, it's so short it goes right under Girl's stun gun. 2, it does no damage when Girl contacts it. So when it stuns, it basically acts as a platform. So that's good. In fact, except for this guy, which does not have a collision shape at all, has no hitbox, does not interact with Girl at all, she can go straight through it. All of these, when stunned, basically become temporary platforms. So for this, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh no. I've been doing 16 by 16 all this time instead of 8 by 8. My tiles for my world are 8 by 8. I'm going to need a moment. Okay. Moment's over. Big boy pants have been pulled up. We're going to figure this out. Because now this needs to in 16 by 16 pixels, because apparently 8 by 8 was just too challenging for me to even conceive. In 16 by 16, I have to show it open and a machine gun drop down. Certainly a challenge, but certainly one I can do. Kind of looks like a wilted piranha plant at this point, but that's okay. We can make that work. And I want it to come down. Nope. I do need it all to be that color because I do need to use that for shading purposes. Let's erase that because that part of the barrel is a bit too... There we go. And then we can just do that. Now let's use that second one to shade some. See how that works, y'all. Let's turn onion skin off and look at it. Okay, that's not the best thing to do because it's not going to be opening and closing that much. It does look like a gun coming down, sort of. Yeah, that's very clearly more of a gun. At least I think so. That has been the hour and a half, and we end with 5 viewers, which still the most I've ever had by far. So Miggs, Taylor, Mac, Mayo, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for sticking around. Thank you for answering questions. Thank you for helping. I will not forget that. Next Wednesday is a room building stream. I will build rooms between now and then. And what I think I want to do is, like, the first 20 or so minutes of the live stream on Wednesday, I want to spend showing you how the light cones work. Thank you, Mac. I appreciate that. I try to be entertaining, even when I make a mistake, because if I knew how to do this and I did it perfectly, it would be absolutely boring. And y'all, I will see you next time. Thank you. Remember, you can follow me at pshoemate.bisky.social. I have the good fortune of pretty much being pshoemate on every social media platform because there's not that many shoemates, and there's even few that have a P for the first initial of their first name. I will see you all next time. Thank you. Take care. Goodbye.